Cape Cod Broadcasting weaves the listening environments of 99.9 WQRC, Ocean 104.7, WFCC Classical 107.5, Cape Country 104, and CapeCon.com's website experience to reflect the lifestyles of the people who live, work, and play on Cape Cod. We hope that you enjoy this podcast.
Good morning, I'm Rob Woodard. This is Sunday Journal. Today I am talking with Petty Officer Phil Davis, who is serving with the United States Coast Guard at Airstation Cape Cod, and he's going to be discussing a typical day in his life with regard to his service. So, good morning, Petty Officer Davis.
Good morning.
Nice to see you here. Thanks for joining me today. I see you've been in the service for about 20 years. What sort of education and training does it take to take care of these aircraft? Obviously, very complex machines, both fixed wing and helicopters.
It's very challenging indeed, and I would definitely say that interest level has to be there first. A lot of things like anything mechanical can be overcome just through not necessarily trial and error, but through published standards and things that are already on the boards. But just like automotive industry as well as a lot of technology, the technology changes a lot faster than the people can keep up that maintain it. But also, like a lot of the concepts over the years with reverse engineering, there's also plenty of ways that we figure out as we go stuff that isn't published or no one's ever had that problem before. And you're really left to disassemble, understand, analyze, and reassemble and put back together to make something work. And there's a lot of things that there just isn't a manual for to analyze or to troubleshoot things.
Can you give me like a specific example of something that happened where you had to, like you say, reverse engineer it and come up with some sort of I wouldn't call it rubber band and glue, but you know.
One of the places I was stationed down in Texas, we had been experiencing a problem with the braking system on the aircraft, in which case whenever the brakes were applied, it would pull to one direction quite severely. It would lead someone to believe that you were either the brakes were dragging on one side or is one side not working. And a lot of the manuals that tell you how to troubleshoot and whatnot would lead you towards a certain direction. Well, once you've exhausted those options and you still have the same problem, now you're left to say, what are we doing differently? What can we do differently? What is it happening out on the runway that we can't duplicate in a hangar? And you really start from scratch, and eventually sometimes it will get to a roundtable session where people will get together and we'll just throw ideas out and try to analyze it from there, saying what is the most impossible scenario we can think of, and then backtrack. And I would say 99% of the time that's usually how the problem gets solved.
I should have mentioned this at the top, that you are an aviation maintenance technician first class, so probably should have mentioned that at the top, but you're responsible for maintaining and making sure that all of that equipment is ready to go when you guys are ready to deploy that. So can you tell me what sort of background you have that lends to this type of expertise? Did you go to some sort of mechanical school? Or
I would definitely be doing my parents' pride by saying their scenario is they accredit it to plenty of Lincoln Logs, toys, erector sets, and Legos as a child. And again, just the curiosity. I grew up on a farm, and my mother's side of the family was definitely mechanically inclined, and that was how you solve problems out there, is you looked at it, you analyzed it, and you overcome those situations. So not necessarily formal training before the Coast Guard, but we definitely there's plenty of formal training and additional training throughout our Coast Guard career that we continually go back for either remedial or as new technology has come on board or new systems are employed, there's training courses that are available for us to go to and learn about those systems.
Sure. And I see that you started your career around 1990 with the Navy. And how long did you serve with the Navy?
5 years active duty, and then I did 3 years with the reserves.
And so you've been in the Coast Guard since 95 or so?
I had a little break in service, so I came in just prior to 2001.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So can you tell me what a typical day is like, if such a thing exists in the life of a Coast Guard aviation tech? Do you come in and kind of, you have a routine, or does it just vary depending on the events of the day?
Yes to everything. The most typical thing is there is nothing typical. No 2 days are the same. Your routine may begin the same. It may start out the same each morning, but it's a never-ending. It's always constantly evolving throughout the day. And the flight schedules, the aircraft themselves, and I do believe every machine has its own personality. And how they cooperate from one day to the next, from one flight to the next, can certainly dictate how your day is going to evolve. Short of, we do have scheduled maintenance that we plan out. We do coordinate that with flight scheduling. And as long as the planes cooperate and the maintenance goes well, then it can be a rather calm day.
And obviously all of your schedule depends on what you're being called to do that particular day
Correct.
as well. If there's a rescue that needs to be, you need to assist someone with a rescue or with a ship adrift or something like that. So all of what you do is obviously predicated on what the overall mission of Airstation Cape Cod is.
Correct. I've always liked to believe that if nothing happened for rescue cases, then it was a good day and everybody did as they were supposed to do.
Right. What was the motivation for you to join the Coast Guard?
I saw myself, I had a slight break in service, and during that time off, came to that conclusion. I was working for a contractor at the time and realized, fortunately at a younger age, that there was more to life than money and that there has to be a better purpose. And I enjoyed the service that I had with the Navy and had no regrets over that time spent and thought it was time for a change, but I still wanted to do the same thing. And as luck would have it, happened to be stumbling through an aviation magazine, and there was a ad that was placed that the Coast Guard had done looking for prior service aviation personnel, and answered the call to the ad, and within a few months was on my way.
So can you give me a brief history of where you have been stationed since you've joined the Coast Guard, or is that just too lengthy for this discussion?
No, it's definitely good. I've had a very broad career, and I've enjoyed it. I love it. I'm certainly grateful for it. I was in Atlanta, Georgia at the time, and I thought, well, there's plenty of East Coast units. There's plenty of air stations around here. They'll just keep me close at home. They're not going to send me too far away. And when the orders arrived, it said Kodiak, Alaska. And I thought, surprise, great, let's go all the way across the nation. But I'd never been to Kodiak before. I'd been in Alaska, but never to Kodiak. So I thought, well, this is a chance to do it. And packed things up, and away I went. Spent 2 years out there and it was certainly an enlightening experience. I love history. And I would recommend anybody, if they get a chance to thumb through some pictures of the Aleutian campaigns during World War II, to go out there and fly over those areas and those remote islands and still see remnants of downed aircraft. They're still there. They're still visible.
Is that right?
And see exactly what some of these troops went through. What I've done pales in comparison to what these guys were exposed to. But I was happy to be out there on Shimya Island. We made a regular run out to one of the navigation stations on Attu, and we would stop at Shimya on the way back. And I had known that my dad had been stationed out there, so it was something that I did a little bit of snooping around when he wasn't home one night, and found some pictures of him on Shimya Island back in the 60s, and went to those same buildings and those same places and had somebody take my picture there and send him those pictures. And it was the same barracks, the same building, the same flagpole that was there from the 1960s. So that was definitely a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And thinking that, okay, this will be a good tour, get priority out of there, I thought, well, I've never been to Texas, and I'd never flown on the jets before. So I thought, well, let's see if that request goes through. And sure enough, nobody wanted to fly on the jets and nobody wanted to go to Texas, so that was the place I went. So we went from the hot temperatures of Atlanta to cold temperatures of Alaska to the hot temperatures of South Texas. And did a full tour there and had quite a bit of interesting things there, because that was during the time of Hurricane Katrina and Rita, and we did a lot of support for those missions.
Obviously, the overall mission of the Coast Guard is to protect the security of the United States, drug interdictions, that sort of thing. But when you get to specific areas, let's say, like, how would you contrast your duty in Alaska with that of what you do here on Cape Cod?
I would venture to say the two parallel each other quite well because of the environment. It's a dominant fishing industry that's in this area, and not only do we want to protect our own nation's resources, but also the world's resources. And it's a little bit bigger than just what's local, but you're trying to draw that fine line in the resource management, and we're there to try and ensure that. And I should say that's more of a supplemental mission. Our primary is search and rescue, but the fisheries management is definitely there, and not so much with immigration issues or anything like that, but certainly we'll say illegal substances, for whatever that might be, that would be attempts to be transported into our territorial waters.
Sure. And so obviously you're enjoying what you're doing. You envision a long-term career with the Coast Guard?
Oh, plenty. I got plenty of good years left in me, so they're going to get their money's worth.
Great. So your job, obviously, you are an aviation maintenance technician, first class. I should say I'm Rob Woodard. This is Sunday Journal. I'm talking with Petty Officer Phil Davis. He's an aviation maintenance technician, first class, serving in the U.S. Coast Guard, stationed at Airstation Cape Cod. But your job doesn't take place solely on the ground. You actually go out on these missions, on these aircraft.
Absolutely.
Okay. Can you tell me something about those experiences?
Just recently, in the last probably 18 months, the Coast Guard, and certainly here on the Cape, we've transitioned to a new airframe, a new aircraft, as the jets have been being retired. And we've been able to stand up this new aircraft with certainly new challenges, but also additional capabilities. We're still learning those capabilities as well as limitations, but it certainly is an asset that provides a lot more ability to the people and the residents here on the Cape and the islands. It's a larger aircraft by size, and for something as simple as a medical evacuation off of one of the islands themselves, we're able to take medical staff, more staff with us, whereas before it was just the crew that would fly the jet to maybe a smaller island, and it was certainly limited by the runway lengths and the facility there, whereas this aircraft certainly opens up more opportunities to the smaller islands, the smaller runways, that we can get people in and out of there, certainly in an emergency situation. Medical staff that we can take with us. They can actually treat people on the aircraft while we're en route to a larger medical facility.
So what is your function as you are approaching your destination, or when you're in the air? What specifically is your function on the aircraft?
For me personally, as well as most of the guys, that we sit in the back of the plane. We monitor a lot of the internal functions of the aircraft. Is everything working right? Is everything running right? The condition of the airframe. But most importantly is the survival equipment and the rescue equipment that is carried in the plane, that we are there to deploy that equipment whenever necessary.
And so you're part of a larger crew, obviously. On these, now are you talking about the Falcon jets?
That was the one that was retired here recently.
Okay,
correct.
So what's the new plane like? Is it larger than the Falcons?
Correct. It's certainly a lot larger. It's based on a Casa 235 commercial aircraft. Its Coast Guard designation is HC-144 Ocean Century. And whereas the Falcon might have only been able to carry, say, 6 people, we might be able to carry 36 people inside the aircraft. So it's substantially larger.
Sure, yeah. Okay, and so once you perform your rescue or whatever you're out there doing, tell me what goes on inside the aircraft as you're either hoisting people up, or if you could go through the mechanics of some sort of a rescue at sea.
For us, as a fixed-wing aircraft, we don't have the ability to hover like the helicopter is. Yeah. So our primary mission at that point, if there is an immediate rescue, is we're going to go out there, we're going to try to identify that survivor, we're going to identify that vessel in distress, and try to pinpoint that exact location and provide the communications for the helicopter that's in transit. We would get out there ahead of them. If necessary, we can deploy smoke flares, we can deploy radios that they can talk to the helicopter themselves. They can, for a communications platform, if they don't have that availability. Also rafts we can deploy with survival kits. And at the very least, we can provide assistance until a helicopter could come on scene. And
sure, even some encouragement.
Certainly, at least if they see that we are there, we do have them in sight, and we're working on it.
So obviously, you must take a lot of gratification from the job. Can you tell me something about that?
I think just it kind of ties back into what I said before, with when nothing happens that day and the rescue alarm doesn't go off, then that was a good day. That was a good day. That meant that the weather cooperated, the seas cooperated, and people had a productive day. It's when that alarm goes off that tells you that somebody's not having a good day. And we're there to try to make sure that we minimize any effect of that.
And do you deal mostly, when you're dealing in emergency situations, with commercial fishermen, commercial vessels, that sort of thing? Would you say that's the majority of with whom you're dealing?
It would really probably depend on the season. I think the commercial fishermen, you would lend to think that would be the primary, because they are out, they're working. They're out there every day of the week. They're out there 365 a year. But you'll get a little bit more of the numbers of the pleasure craft during the summer times for the weather, of obvious reasons. But it's not uncommon to have situations where we've had to provide a communications platform until a helicopter could come and medevac someone off of a cruise ship. So there's certainly no limit to the size of vessel that we may assist.
Does any one particular experience during one of these rescues stand out, whether it's something funny or harrowing, or you've probably got lots of stories?
I have plenty, that's for sure. One always sticks out in my mind that was one of the funniest, and you learn a new respect for the aircraft. And there's certain things that after, I'm sure that the ship captains can understand, they can relate to this to their own vessels, the same way aviators would look at the plane. On a rescue case out off South Texas, and very, very nasty thunderstorms. And every time we get in that plane, you do a risk assessment. Is the risk worth the efforts Is there a gain to this, to going out? And the decision was made that, yes, the risk was worth it. And we decided to go out and search for a mayday call, distress call. And shortly after taking off, probably about halfway in transit, the plane was struck by lightning.
Oh, great.
And that was an interesting experience. I'd never had that happen before. And in a very small plane, you're very aware of it when it takes place. And it certainly had everyone's attention at that point. And the risk assessment was reevaluated. And we said, well, there's still enough evidence to suggest that there was somebody out there. So let's continue on. And not probably 20 minutes later, we got struck again.
Nice.
And at that point, we said, this may not be such a good idea. We're putting a lot of people at risk here for this. And we made a few radio calls to see if there was any amplifying information. They had any other corroborating information saying that there was indeed someone out there, because we were just going on just a single call at that point. And no other units, no other stations could provide any other assistance. They said, no, we don't have any other information that would lend us to believe that this is credible. So they said, if you wish to turn around and come back, you're welcome to. So we said, definitely no problem. We're going to turn around and go back. And shortly after making that 180 to go back home, we got struck a third time in that aircraft.
Wow. And
you don't realize it at the time. And we kind of laughed about it, but everything was working, everything was fine. But the joke still remained that electronically speaking, this plane will never be the same again.
Right.
And shortly after landing, we kind of walked around, take a breather for a minute, and started looking over the plane and realized just how much damage it had suffered to structurally to that aircraft from that. And it was quite substantial. And I had a short little moment with it when I arrived. That was in South Texas quite a few years ago. But then when I arrived up here in the Cape just a few years ago, that aircraft was here stationed at the Cape, and I got to fly on it again.
So you actually got on it, huh?
I got right back on that plane. I said, we've got a good relationship here. It got me home every time. So
that's great. That's great. Well, we're just about out of time. Anything else you want to let our listeners know about your service and experience in the Coast Guard?
Well, I certainly have to send out my encouragement to all the people that are on the water, my respect for them, both commercial and as well as the civilians that are out there. I can't stress enough that with a lot of the newer technology today, there's a lot of easy things that they can do, from a simple whistle to a small LED flashlight, anything that you can carry on you or clip to your belt loop while you're out there on the water, that should events not prove to be as hopeful as they wish for that day, that it would certainly aid us and increase their odds of survival that we're out there, and certainly encourage everybody to be responsible boaters. And when I have nothing going on that day, then that was a good day.
Terrific. Well, thanks so much. I'm Rob Woodard. This is Sunday Journal. I've been talking today with Petty Officer Phil Davis. He is an aviation maintenance technician first class, and he serves in the U.S. Coast Guard. He's stationed at Airstation Cape Cod. Thanks for listening.
This podcast is a presentation of Cape Cod Broadcasting, which is solely responsible for its content. Thank you for listening. For more information, please visit us at capecodbroadcasting.com.